My name's Tracey Segarra. I am a storyteller, and I am also the host and producer of Now You're Talking, a live storytelling show that puts on shows with storytellers who tell true stories from their lives. We have done 2 shows at the Tillis Center now. We have another show scheduled there for November. Hopefully we can all be back together then. In the meantime, the Tillis Center has asked me to do this little mini workshop on storytelling. I give storytelling workshops to individuals and groups and businesses all around the island. And they asked me to just give you a taste of what it's like now that we're all at home, to give you an idea of what it's like to be able to tell your own true story. So just to give you a little background on me, I discovered storytelling by listening to the Moth radio hour back in 2015. And I was blown away by the stories that I heard on NPR. And my first thought was, this is incredible. And my next thought was, I have to do this. And so I finally got up the nerve to go to one of their story slams, which are story competitions in Manhattan and Brooklyn. And I got up and I told a story, and there are judges in the audience, and there are 10 storytellers telling a story on the theme. And I told my story, and I was so nervous, and then I won. And then I started winning other story slams, and I won a grand slam, and then one of my stories ended up on the Moth radio hour. And then I started teaching storytelling and starting my show. So that's just a little background on me. What I'm gonna do now, we just have 10 or 15 minutes. I'm just gonna give you just a little bit of a taste of what it's like to work on and find your own true stories. So what I'm gonna start with is I'm gonna tell you a brief story, and then I'm going to break it down to show you how stories are crafted. It is an art, but it is not rocket science, and it's something that everybody can do. We all have meaningful stories in our lives that deserve to be told. So this is the story that I told that ended up on the Moth radio hour. So it is 1996, and I'm on an express bus to the Bronx, headed to Manhattan to go wedding dress shopping with my future mother-in-law. And I'm not looking forward to this because she and I are not exactly friends. Rita and I come from very different worlds. She is a Sicilian from the Bronx, a waitress and a secretary, and a Jehovah's Witness, a devout Jehovah's Witness. This strange religion I know nothing about. I'm a middle-class Jew from Long Island. So when I meet her son, a lapsed Jehovah's Witness, and we start dating, Rita and I kind of circle each other warily, and we're polite, but a little cold. But then when Fred and I decide to get married, I realize that I have to make some kind of gesture to get to know this woman. I mean, she's gonna be my family. So here we are on this express bus. And the ride into Manhattan is incredibly uncomfortable. She and I have never been alone in a room together, so neither of us really kind of knows what to say. But when we get to the bridal salon and I start trying on wedding gowns, she tells me I look beautiful in every single one, which is a complete lie, but the sweetest of lies, and I feel myself start to soften towards her. And then when we get back to the Bronx and it's time to say goodbye, she suddenly grabs me and she gives me a hug. And it's the kind of hug that tells me how much this must have meant to her, that I reached out to her in this way. And that is the thing that breaks open a place in my heart for her, and we start to become friends. And over the next 2 years, Rita and I bond over the 2 things that Rita loves the most: eating and shopping. No one can devour a lobster like Rita Romeo. And she doesn't care whether she goes to Macy's, a dollar store, although dollar stores are her favorite. She just loves to shop. But then in 2000, when my twin daughters are born, she becomes my savior. I am so overwhelmed by these 2 creatures. But every Friday, we live in Long Island now, every Friday, she comes out from the Bronx and she spends the weekend with us and helps with the girls. And when I hear the back screen door open each Friday, it's like the cavalry has arrived and I can finally breathe. And you know, Rita absolutely adores her granddaughters, but she is not your typical cookie baking grandma. You know, she's a Sicilian from the Bronx. And one day when the girls are about 2 or 3, I hear her talking to them in the other room. I'm in the kitchen. And I hear her say to them, "Oh, I love you so much. I just want to punch you." But she also has her tender side. And once when we go to visit them in the Bronx, I'm looking around the apartment and I notice that Rita has been stealing things from my children. Like just little things, like a barrette or a small stuffed animal. And I can't for the life of me figure out why. Until it dawns on me. She literally wants something of theirs to hold on to when she can't be with them. When the girls are about 4 or 5, every year we send out holiday cards, and usually it's just generic season's greeting cards with the girl's picture. But this year, the girls are getting a little older. I'm starting to think about sending them to Hebrew school, and so I decide to send out a Hanukkah card. And I don't send it to Rita because Jehovah's Witnesses don't celebrate holidays, but I do send it to Fred's aunt, who lives near them in the Bronx and who likes to display the cards on her mantle. Well, about a week later, Fred, my husband, gets a call from his mother, and she tells him that since we've decided to raise our daughters as Jews, that she can no longer be part of our lives. And when I hear this, my first reaction is shock, because I had no idea she felt this way. Like, we have never discussed religion. And then I'm hurt because, this is me, Rita, this is me. How could she do this to me? And then I get angry, because this has to be the most anti-Semitic thing that anybody has ever said to me. And this is my family. But then I think, she's just in shock. She'll get over it. She'll calm down. She'll call me. She'll apologize. And this will all be over. And so I wait. But after 4 weeks of waiting, it's clear. She's not calling. And then I dig in and I tell my husband, if she cannot accept us and how we're going to raise our daughters, then I don't want her in my life, and I'm done. And he agrees. And we don't talk to them for months. Well, about 7 or 8 months later, a new dollar store opens up in my neighborhood, and I can't help it. I think of Rita and I want to call her, and the urge to call her is just so strong that I find myself one day just picking up that phone. And I have no idea what I'm going to say to her, and she answers on the first ring. "Hi," I say, it's Tracey. "Hi," she says. "I miss you," I say. "I miss you too," she says. And just like that, it's over. We never discuss it. We just step over that moment in our lives as if it never happened. And over the next 7 years, Rita becomes my second mother. In 2011, Rita passes away. And I miss her so much. I miss her every day. But I think about what we almost missed, like that time when the girls were 5 and they had their first and only ballet recital where they proved they are much more adept at pratfalls than graceful pirouettes. Or that time when they were 8 and all of us told ghost stories around the fireplace. I know I would have been justified all those years ago in keeping Rita out of my life. What she did was hurtful, it was cruel, and it was wrong. But in the end, I decided I didn't want to stand on my principles if it meant I had to stand there all alone. At the end of her life, Rita was in hospice, and I went to go visit her because it was really important to me to spend a moment alone with her and let her know how much she meant to me and what an impact she had on my life. And so I do. And then she tries to say something back, but she's wearing an oxygen mask, and it's really difficult to understand her. And then all of a sudden, alarm bells go off, nurses rush in, they rush me out, and the moment's just gone. So I don't know what she wanted to tell me, but I'd like to think it was some variation of, "I love you so much. I just want to punch you." So that's my story about me and my mother-in-law. And now what I'd like to do is just kind of give you a little mini idea of how that story was put together and what are the elements that I put into the story to make it so interesting and have you on the edge of your seat. So hopefully you can see this. I'm going to hold this up. So what are good stories about? Good stories are about unforgettable moments. They're about conflict. They're about revelations. They're about change. And they're about vulnerability. So let's talk about how this story has all those elements. So definitely this was an unforgettable moment. I mean, we didn't talk for months, right? We had a conflict, the conflict over us sending the holiday card and her telling us that since we're going to raise our daughters as Jews, she wouldn't be part of our lives. The revelation in this story for me is I didn't want to stand on my principles if it meant I had to stand there all alone. I didn't want to not have her in my life, even though what she did was wrong. And I still believe to this day that it was wrong, but it wasn't as important as missing out on that relationship. And so that was the change in me, is that I didn't stand on those principles because I decided that was more important. And vulnerability, showing, that the hurt. And, a lot of times in stories, when you hear really good stories at the Moth or other places, you'll hear people telling things that people don't ordinarily say. It's the hidden moments, the times where we're ashamed or we've done things that we're not proud of, or moments in our lives that people don't normally talk about. So when people do talk about them in storytelling, it's very powerful. So the next thing I want to show you are, and I use these slides when this flip chart when I'm teaching storytelling. So the next thing I want to tell you are the 5 beats of storytelling. And this isn't something that I came up with. This is from time immemorial. This is how stories are created. And you can use this for fairy tales, movies. All stories generally follow these 5 beats. So the first one is the setup. If you're going to change, we need to know who you are at the beginning of the story. So at the beginning of my story, you see that I am a Jew who is in a bus with my future mother-in-law, who I barely know because we really don't have much in common. So the inciting incident, that's the card. When I send the card and I find out the conflict, we already have conflict because she's Jehovah's Witness, I'm a Jew, and we don't really know how to relate. The rising action, that's when you hear about me sending the card and then the repercussions of sending the card and then us not talking for all those months. And then the 4th element is the aha moment. And this is the most important moment in the story. This is the moment where you thought one thing and then all of a sudden you have a revelation and you have this aha moment where you are somehow changed. It can be a small change, it can be a big change. And then often you have a takeaway or kind of the moral of the story. But for me, I just have a funny ending that calls back to the beginning of the story. Since I don't know what she said to me, I do know how much she loved me, and that she might say something like, I love you so much, I want to punch you, because that was Rita. Okay. The next thing I want to talk to you about is some of the things, what makes stories come alive? Because, telling a story is not just a recitation of facts. It's when I tell a story, I try to relive the story. I try to be there in the moment and bring you there in the moment with me. So the first thing that really helps make a story come alive is scenic detail. So immediately in my story, I'm in an express bus. You can picture that. You want people to picture where you are in the story. Dialogue, I love you so much, I want to punch you, that she says to my daughters. And that tells you almost everything you need to know about Rita, her Sicilian background and the blue-collar worker growing up in the Bronx. The 5 senses is another thing you can bring into stories. What were you thinking? What were you hearing? What were you smelling? What were you seeing? Describe it. That helps people really understand your story. Okay. Tension and surprise. Those are also really important elements of a story. So, tension. There is actually a study by a neuroscientist, Paul Zaks, and he did a study. He did a study of people who listened to stories and to see the effect of storytelling on the brain. And what he discovered was that when somebody tells a compelling true story that has struggle, that has stakes, you have something you stand to gain or lose by the actions in the story, that not only does the audience start to empathize with the storyteller, but it releases this neurochemical in your brain called oxytocin. And when this chemical is released, you not only have empathy for the storyteller, but you literally start feeling the feelings that the storyteller is feeling. And this leads to trust, and it leads to that human connection that's so important to all of us in the rest of our lives. And it's a way that humans connect. So storytelling, in summary, is all about connecting, and it's connecting to universal truths through the unique stories in our lives. So what I'd like all of you to do is to think about the stories in your lives where you were one person, something happened, and then you were somehow changed. And I give a lot of prompts when I do my workshops, and some of the prompts that you might think of if you want to think about writing your own stories or writing them down or telling them to people are, think of a time when you were surprised in a really good way, or think of a time when you were surprised in a really bad way. Think of a time where you really wanted to travel somewhere. Did you go? What happened? Think about a time when a family gathering or a family meal went awry. Think about the time your first child or your first grandchild was born. So think about moments. These are moments that you're probably already telling stories about, okay? So think of those moments, and we all have stories, and stories are a wonderful way to connect with your families right now over Zoom if you need to. Hopefully we'll all be seeing each other again, and we'll be able to hug. My mother is 87 years old, lives in Manhattan. I just had a social distance visit with her yesterday. And not long ago, I actually recorded her when I was taking a train back from Montreal, we dropped my daughter off at school there. And I interviewed her about her life, and I was asking her a lot of these questions. So think about the important moments in your life that might turn into good stories. And then I hope we see you all when we are at the Tilla Center for our next show, which will be in November. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye.